Picture a mom. She might be young or old, rich or poor, your race or another, but almost certainly the person that you pictured is able-bodied. For non-disabled women, motherhood is both socially and statistically overwhelmingly the norm. But for women like me, someone with a physical disability, motherhood isn't something you picture. Like a lot of disabled women growing up, I got the message that my body was unattractive, undesirable. And I also got this message, that disabled people can't be caregivers.
Back in the day, it was even like, well, how would you even get pregnant? I mean, there are people out there that think people with disabilities are just these asexual bodies floating around. And it's like, we're humans too. We have desires, we have wants, we have needs. We can fall in love, we can have sex. God forbid.
Most people do actually, for most disabilities, particularly many genetic disorders, do well in pregnancy.
I have a spinal cord injury from a rare neurological illness. I had my first child about 5 years ago, and I'm nearing delivery now with my second. After my son was born, I went looking for resources for disabled parents like me. I couldn't find almost anything about disability and pregnancy, so I spent the last year reporting it out for myself. Growing up, I benefited from laws like the Americans with Disabilities Act, which allows people like me to go to school, work, and participate in public life. Today, it's not uncommon to see TV ads with disabled athletes, disabled models. We see disabled doctors in brochures for hospitals. We even have very prominent disabled politicians. So it's striking that when it comes to something like pregnancy and parenthood that are actually much more statistically common, we don't see them anywhere. That means disabled mothers get left out of the conversation, not just socially, but in our medical system. I sat down with Dr. Marie Flores, another disabled woman who is pursuing pregnancy through IVF. Marie is a wheelchair user with a musculoskeletal condition.
So the condition that I have, I inherited it from my father. He also has the same condition. And I use a wheelchair. I am able to walk, but I don't have good balance.
Disabled women have babies about the same amount as non-disabled women, and yet we kind of never see ourselves. What do you see? Why are people shocked by seeing a woman in a wheelchair?
You know, growing up, I didn't see disabled bodies in the movies or in cartoons or on TV or even in like toys that I played with. And I think the representation is really important because in the scheme of things, we're diverse. We're a diverse world, we're a diverse country, and disability is part of diversity. And I think we're doing better now. We definitely have a long way to go. I've had people make comments to me like, oh, wait, you're gonna have a baby? How are you gonna deliver the baby? Like, how's it gonna come out of your butt? You know, it's like, I don't have an alien pelvis just because I'm sitting in this chair.
Because I grew up in this body where everything was always wrong. It was always a problem. My body was always a problem.
Unfortunately, there were people in my life in all areas, including family, that were not supportive and thought that me having a pregnancy would be something that was too dangerous, or that I could not do, or that I wouldn't be able to handle, or that I'd be risking my life doing it. I do want to say, though, at the same time, there were others who were unconditionally supportive. I remember my sister, Anita, telling me, having your own child is worth risking your life. It's worth it.
Tell me more about what it felt like for you when you were pregnant last year.
There was the feeling of, I told you, people that said I couldn't do it. I did it. I don't even know how to explain it, Sonja, but just this feeling of like femininity, like, I'm a woman, I'm pregnant, I've done like the thing that like has been what women do and only women do.
Those of us with physical, intellectual, and sensory disabilities do face increased risks in pregnancy, some of which stem from our conditions. But pregnancy is risky for everybody. It's the leading cause of death for teenage girls around the world. And here in the US, we have the highest rate of maternal mortality of any developed country on Earth. Most women are told, this is natural, your body will know what to do, your instincts will tell you how to be a mother. I got the opposite message. The reality is, obstetricians are one of the most sued specialties in medicine, and many are afraid to treat women like me. Dr. Deborah Krakow of UCLA has become an advocate for women in this position.
You are someone who is very important to several disability communities. How did you start working with those patients?
I started to work in communities that had genetic problems, but most of the individuals who were taking care of those patients were geneticists who had very little background in obstetrics and gynecology, in pregnancy, and realized that there was a real need.
And it was so reassuring to hear from you that of course you can get pregnant and of course you can have a family. That brings me to another thing that I hear often about your practice, because we know in California the C-section rate is something like 23% for healthy nulliparous women, whereas every disabled woman I know was either told or went in believing that she would have a C-section no matter what.
I think that it's just the fear of, I don't understand what's going on, I don't understand how the person will do in labor, and I'm going to just support them in saying, well, they want a healthy mother, healthy baby, and that just seems safe to them. I've been a huge advocate. There are patients who I've said to, you will need to have a C-section because you could die in labor because your pelvis is too small. And we want you and the fetus to be as healthy as possible. But I've also made phone calls to obstetricians to say, you know, I saw your patient, or they contacted me by email or phone, and just let me educate you, if I was taking care of them, I would probably allow a vaginal delivery as long as the patient was doing well and the fetus was doing well. I can think of, over my career, a handful of times where I say, I'm so worried that you'll lose your life being pregnant, so let's help find you a surrogate or some other means of having a child. But I would really say that those are rare events.
My son was pretty young when he got too big for me to carry. We had to have a lot of conversations about what I could and couldn't do and ways that he needed to help me for both of us to get through the business of everyday life. At the same time, there are things I can do that other mothers can't. For example, I use an assistive device to empty my bladder, and it's just much more comfortable for me to do that standing up. So when it came time to potty train our son, I was the one who taught him how to aim into the toilet. I feel like there was a sense almost for me of guilt about knowing there were things that I would not be able to do for my son that a non-disabled mom would be able to do, right? And limitations that I would have. Disabled parents are so creative, they're so adaptive, they're thinking of things like 5 miles ahead that non-disabled parents just like do on the fly.
Goodness, yes, because we have to plan everything. It's like, oh my God, how am I going to get over this street? And you know MacGyver? Are you old enough to know MacGyver? Inventors should come talk to us about inventing stuff, even just for moms without disabilities, because we by default have to be creative or we will be 6 feet under the ground.
Right. And I feel like every time that I had to come up with a creative solution for how I was going to be able to adapt something to my needs, it was sort of healing in a way. It's like, no, I can do this. I can care for him, even if the way that I care for him looks different.
Yeah, and you did, and you did really, really well.
In certain ways, my early experiences of motherhood were very lonely because they were so different to what other women that I knew had gone through and the ways they had been treated. What I learned in reporting this piece is actually many of the experiences that I had are quite standard to other women with disabilities, and that were not all that rare. It made me feel much more connected to the experience of motherhood, knowing that I actually shared so much in common with women like me. Have questions about disability and pregnancy? Leave us a comment and check out my story at latimes.com.